Hey guys, this is Caleb with DSLR Video Shooter, and today I've got yet another audio adapter / preamp review for you guys. The audio device in question is the Beachtek DXA Micro Pro. Now, Beachtek actually reached out to me and asked if they could send this to me. They've been noticing that I've been doing a lot of these reviews for preamps and audio devices, and also mentioned that a lot of the ones I've been doing, those Chinese models, often rip off the US and Canadian guys, which Beachtek is from Canada. And they just use cheaper components, so they recommended I check this particular unit out, and I saw it was pretty different when it comes to I/O, so I thought it'd be a great device to check out, and I am really impressed with it. There's only two things that I don't like. We'll get to that a little bit later. So this unit costs $150, and if you pick it up in the box, you will find the device itself, a brass cold shoe mount, an Allen key for adjusting the 1/4-20 at the top, two 3.5 to 3.5 millimeter output angled coiled cables, the operating manual, and a 2-year warranty. So now let's talk about the physical stuff and when it comes to mounting. You can mount this device underneath your camera or above it using the cold shoe mount, or remove the cold shoe mount altogether and you have a female 1/4-20 at the bottom of the unit. I'd recommend using it like you see here, on top of the camera with that cold shoe, because almost every camera I tested with it, it's wide enough where it's going to block the battery door of your camera. Finally, there are two female cold shoes on either side of the unit for mounting audio receivers, microphones, really anything else. To power this thing up, you're going to need one single 9-volt battery, and then we have the power switch right here, and that brings us to the inputs and outputs on this device. If we spin it around here to the left side, you'll notice we have three 3.5 millimeter inputs. We have left, right, and stereo. And with this whole unit, it's really designed for use with cameras, so the end setup or output is going to be stereo, left and right. So we only have 2 channels to work with, but this device gives us a lot of flexibility when it comes to how we use those channels. The final microphone input is on the other side, and we have a single XLR input, and it's labeled as right, and you can mix and match it with those other inputs, and we'll talk about that here in a second. The final input is on the face of the unit, and that is the monitor in. And that brings us to a really cool feature with this. This actually has a headphone amp built right in. So instead of a really crappy one that you can't adjust, here we have a nice little knob where we'll be able to fine tune our headphone levels. And so the way this works is if you have a camera with a headphone jack, you'll be able to use one of the included cables and simply run it into that monitor in. And we'll cover that in several different camera setups here in a second. Moving on to outputs, on that left side we have a single 3.5 millimeter output that we can run to our camera's mic input, and then on the front or face of the unit we have that headphone jack for using obviously with our headphones. If we look back at the face of the unit, you'll notice there are a ton of switches here with several different options. We have our 2 knobs for our input preamps, and obviously we can adjust those independently and have a lot of flexibility with that. And next to each one we have a high and low option. So essentially, if you turn the dial all the way up and you're still not getting enough juice, you can simply bump it up into high mode, and now you've pushed those preamps even further. But in general, I'm going to recommend you stick it on low and use the knobs exclusively. The next switch to the right is a mono and stereo switch. We'll talk about some uses for that in a second. Right below that we have phantom power. That of course is for our XLR jack on the side. Otherwise you're going to want to leave that off. Finally, we have our power on and off switch and a monitor switch with record or play. So essentially what this switch is going to do is, if you're using a camera that has a headphone jack and you're running your headphone jack to that monitor in, you're going to want to switch it over to play. But if you're using this unit with something like an A6500 that does not have a headphone jack, go ahead and switch it over to record. That way, when you plug your headphones in, you'll be listening to the unit and not the monitor in jack. So now let's set this thing up and actually work with it a little bit. So I've got the unit, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it off, and I'm going to add a microphone. I'm gonna start with the Rode Video Micro, and this brings us to the one of 2 things that I don't really care for on this unit. This Rode Video Micro, I wish I could face it forward, but unfortunately the way this is designed, I only can put it up or down like so, which is a little silly, but it'll work for our demonstration here. Next, I'm going to take my microphone and I can plug it into one of several places. Again, we only have a final stereo left and right channel output, so you can mix and match these a little differently. If you have two devices that have a 3.5 millimeter, you can plug one into the left, one into the right, and you can independently control the levels. If you have one XLR microphone and one 3.5 millimeter microphone, you could plug your 3.5 millimeter into the left on this device and then your XLR on the opposite side. And then finally we have a stereo output, which is the one I'm going to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and plug my microphone in. Next, we need to get our camera hooked up with it. If you have a camera with a headphone jack, go ahead and use one of the included cables to go from your headphone jack on your camera to the monitor in on the device like so. Next, we're going to take the output cable, or our second cable that's included, go from our mic in on our camera and plug that into the output on the unit. We got a lot of wires here, but it's going to work out really well. Next, if your camera has that headphone jack and you run that cable, go ahead and switch things over to play under the monitor switch. Next, I'm going to turn the unit on and we should start seeing levels on our device. What I recommend at this point is to go into your camera's menu system and turn your level all the way to as low as it'll go and still record audio. So I have everything turned all the way up, and obviously my levels are, in my opinion, a little too high. And since we have such good levels, I don't need to switch our input switches up too high. I can keep them on low, which is awesome news, and the preamp is doing a great job here. Now, at this point, we can do a really cool thing with a single microphone called a safety track, or creating a safety track. You can see up here I have my output switch set to mono, and I have both dials turned all the way up, and we're getting, the levels are at the same level because my knobs are at the same level. So what I'm going to do at this point is turn my right all the way down, so all we see here is our left channel. I'm now going to set that to a level that is appropriate. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. I like to hover around -12. My camera's falling asleep. Check 1, 2. That's looking pretty good right there. So I've got my knob not even at halfway and we're totally good. Next, I'm going to take my right channel and I'm going to turn that up until it's about 6 to 12 dB lower than my left channel. So something like this. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2, 3. Let's get it right. Probably in there is a good place. So what's cool about this is when I hit record on my camera, I'm recording the same microphone split on two different channels, left and right, and one is lower than the other. The beauty with this is if I get really loud when I'm doing this recording, the one that is higher, the left channel, will peak and it's gone forever, distorted. But my right channel is going to go with it, which means we have that safety track, and that's where that name comes in. So as the camera falls asleep again, now we've created a safety track. Awesome feature. Definitely something to use if you're only using one microphone. So enough talk, let's go ahead and do some audio recordings with this. First setup, G7 with an XLR microphone. This will be a good way to see what things will sound like on modern cameras. For settings, I've got the Beachtek set to low for my input, and the dial is at around 25%. On the camera, I have my levels as low as possible, and we're doing all the work with this unit. And now you're listening to the Rode Video Micro, just out of frame in the same position as the XLR microphone, run via 3.5mm cable to the unit. So this is what it sounds like. Again, this microphone isn't amped up at all, so the preamp is doing all the work. And for levels, I'm actually a little higher, not quite at 50%, so maybe 40% on the dial, and we're still set to low on the switch. And now we've switched to the Canon 6D. Any Canon DSLR is going to really struggle with its preamp, so that's where this device shines. If this device can help this camera out, that means it's going to work great with pretty much any camera. So right now I'm using the XLR microphone. Going into the unit, I have the switch on the gain level for the right channel set to high, and I'm about 40-ish% on my dial, so it's turned up not very much. Levels are looking pretty good on the camera itself, so this is what the Canon DSLR sounds like with an XLR microphone. And now we have the Rode Video Micro going into the Beachtek and into the Canon 6D. Settings are set all the way down on the actual camera, and the preamp is doing all the work. The dial is set to just past 75%, so we've got it turned up pretty high, and we're still on the low setting for that switch for gain. And finally, just so you can hear the difference and why you'd want to use a preamp like this, I have the Rode Video Micro going straight into the camera, and I'm using the camera levels to set the correct audio level. I had to crank it up to a little below halfway on the camera, so the camera preamp is working a lot, and that's not going to be as good as a unit like the Beachtek, so we'll be able to compare the two and see what they sound like. So this is what the Canon DSLR sounds like with an XLR microphone. Checking 1, 2, 3, checking 1, 2, 3. So as you heard, things sounded awesome, and I have no problems with recommending this to anyone on any camera system, really. It's strong enough and the preamps are good enough to handle poor cameras like Canon's DSLRs and everything else. We have several different inputs and outputs. I love having that little headphone amp built in. Just a great flexible unit, especially for $150. So the bottom line is this: if you want a single audio device to work with any camera going forward and pretty much any microphone, this is a great option from Beachtek. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Check the links in the description to pick one of these puppies up if you're interested. Otherwise, you can watch fresh videos here at DSLR Video Shooter every single week. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.